Welcome back. This is Confessions of a Wedding Band, brought to you by all of us here at the Martini Shot. This is a podcast where we document our shenanigans both on and off stage and discuss our originals. We are a local band out of Southern Colorado where we have 25 years of fun stories that we'd like to remember. Our first idea was to write a book, but since none of us have written a book before, Confessions of a Wedding Band was born. I'm Brian, I'm the host of the show. I play trumpet in the band.
I'm Rob, I play sax and keyboards.
I'm Craig, I play the drums.
Our Michael McPiz III, guitar.
Brooke, I play bass.
Andy, singer and guitar.
I'm Steven, I play guitar and saxophone.
So, from my experience and talking with other groups and other musicians in my life, I noticed that our recording and song creation and writing process is different than, I would say, different than most. Usually, most of the experiences that I'm accustomed to, you have one person that comes in with a song and says, hey, band, learn this song. And that's not how this group works.
So I think that, we've stated prior that the way we kind of started creatively was, I was writing songs as a solo act, for which I think all of us have done long before. And I think on our first EP, there's a couple of tunes that I wrote just, before the band was even around. And then really the collaborative work started happening when Ryan got in the band. And This Highway is the perfect example of that. The first song that he and I wrote together, it started becoming a very collaborative process. And, we have kind of noticed that a lot of it starts with Ryan coming up with an idea, a lick, a chord progression, whatever it might be. And then I come in with some lyrics, and then there's a lot of collaboration that happens after that. One of the things that we always say is that Brooke is the bridge king. Every single time we come in with an idea, Ryan's come up with the actual premise of the song, the hook, whatever it might be. Some lyrics are there and it needs something else, and Brooke always jumps in with making that song expand just that much more with the bridge that he adds into it, and then it kind of goes from there as far as everybody joining in.
If you don't know what a bridge is, it's just like a different thing for your listener to check out, right? So it breaks up a verse and a chorus, right? Mm-hmm. So it's old as time, as far as like compositional standpoint. I mean, guys hundreds of years ago did that, where they would just use like an A and a B and then an A and a B, and then eventually they'd add some C, right? Or they'd add a new, piece of information for you to listen to. But anyway.
Yeah, and I think, starting with an idea, it's just an idea, like basically either a hook or just a riff. And I mean, very, very simple. And the way that everybody contributes, like Brian said, I think is very unique, because, it could be something as simple as just recording something on my phone, just with my voice and just a riff, or I'll go on GarageBand on my phone and just record something very simple, and then, quickly turns into this huge song, which, a lot of times I never would have thought it would take that turn, like the bridge, or, with a verse, Andy will come in and then write some different chords to the verse and then just go from there. But from start to finish, it would be something very, very simple, and then just turn into a huge song, which is really cool, really unique.
That idea would come over through a text message, until we finally started collecting them all on like a Google Drive, where we have just tens, I would say about 50 ideas on that drive at one point of just either simple ideas that came from uses uh, or what I was to create on our phone and then would stick it into that drive so that we could have and reference it when we start writing. And I think that's really creative. So after that point, then as the song builds, all of us are involved. And I just think that's really unique.
Mm-hmm.
I remember funny, the first time I remember like co-writing with Andy was we were both professional choir directors, high school choir directors, and we were at an honor choir and we were buying food for some of the students on the trip in a supermarket.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm riffing this like part and we're like harmonizing and trying to figure
in the middle
out,
of the grocery store
like what this song is going to be. And we're walking around shopping, getting groceries for our students. I'll never forget that.
I remember that. I'm glad you brought that up because I had forgotten that. And I can see it in my mind's eye for sure. Us walking down, I remember looking at like Gushers or something like that, just a snack that we were getting for the kids. And we were working out harmonies for one of the tunes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, as far as like that whole process goes, there was a lot of different places that we also did that creative process. And one of my favorites was early days when I'd meet you guys over at Andy's apartment. And we would all kind of get together and we would start to piece all these ideas and all these different influences that we had. We have so many different influences. We would bring all that together and we'd sit around like we are kind of now, like on the couch, just drinking some beers and chilling out, laughing at Andy's dog. Andy's dog had a sex addiction. But that's another story.
She did.
And
just sitting around with acoustics.
Yeah. Well, and I think what was really fun about that time, and that really was kind of the beginning of figuring out the process, was we were not recording, but writing multiple songs at once. If you remember that, like many songs that you hear on the first full-length record, we were writing a lot of those at the same exact time. One of those was My Town, and really the hook from My Town came from Bry. Bry came up with the ba-da-ba-ba-ba-da-ba-ba, and then we rolled off of that. So that's kind of another example of how the hook can come from elsewhere, and then we kind of roll off of that. So we were writing My Town at that same time that we were writing Catchy Song, that we were writing I Don't Mind. Multiple different songs were being written at the exact same time. It was a very creative time for us.
And usually we'd have to take a little bit of time to just walk away from it. You get punch drunk from running it too much and then have an idea and be like, I got it. Come back. And this is it. How about this? And then it would unlock something to the next level, and then we'd be able to like continue to compose through it.
And it was funny because you're the bridge king. You just say, give me 20 minutes and then disappear and go somewhere. I think you went to his garage or something. Yeah, I'll just be back. And then 20 minutes later, you come back with this awesome bridge.
That none of us would have thought of
Yep.
One of the experiences that I remember was having a writing session in one of our friends' cabins out in Westcliffe. And we had the whole weekend there and to collaborate, to practice songs, to write songs. And just a beautiful scenery to do that in.
What a gift that they gave us because it was such a creative place. And you got up early and you'd go run through the forest like super early, and we all kind of had our own process, and we had time to just like set up in that grand area where we had the drum set up, the main living room of the cabin, and had high ceilings because it had a loft. And man, it was gorgeous.
It was a special experience all the way around in that we could go into different rooms of the cabin. I know Ryan put his amp in a completely different room for the solo for Bruntry. And then sat out with everyone else. So we kind of really felt like we were having that recording experience of, all of us playing together, which was the first time we'd been able to do that, in this album, as far as we recorded together at Steven's studio up in Denver, the CU Denver's studio, doing the same thing at the cabin, but then also the creative experience at the cabin of us being able to separate into different areas of the cabin itself. Ryan and I went out and wrote probably more than half of Love for Life on the porch in a brisk kind of morning. That's one of those memories that I have that I'll never forget. There's just the two of us going out there and trying to figure out what we wanted to do for that tune, while everybody else was out doing something with another person in the band to make a different song come all the way to life.
Something to say. Good times and bad times till death do us part. It seems like yesterday that I first saw you smile, and I can't help but stop and stare once in a while. I've dreamed like every day you've been.
And every time I hear Bruntry and I hear that solo come up, I just think about where I was during that time. I was in my room taking a nap. And your amp is set up like in one of the rooms.
Yeah, it was downstairs.
It was downstairs, so that's why I heard it so vividly, man. So, but every time I hear that song, I just think about where I was during that solo, man.
Oh,
So
me too.
it totally reminds me of that time.
Probably, we always talk about how everybody was on me about tone, and I think the greatest tone I've ever had in my entire life was because of that room, and I just got to crank that amp because it was out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
So, we were playing till 4, 5 o'clock in the morning, and nobody's around. So you're out in the middle of the woods. And, I think about that too. I was able to just crank it so much, and then it's bouncing off of just a wood cabin. That's
Speaking of like early morning or somewhere late at night, I'll always remember for So Much Trouble, we were listening to Brian play that sweet trumpet lick that's like all mariachi, right? And we were coaching him and producing him.
I remember that.
And that's something that's really cool about our band, is that like we do kind of like say, I think you could do better. You could do a better take. You could do better. And I remember that time where you went take after take, and we were like, more this, more that. I'm sure we were super obnoxious for whatever reason to you, but we got that take, and I just remember everybody was like, that's it, that's the take, and we were like,
especially when you did that little vibrato thing.
Yeah, like more shake,
It's nothing like recording and then having 6 producers stand behind you as you're recording there.
It's a little intimidating, let me tell you.
A little bit.
Baby, you're so much trouble. Yeah, baby, you're so much trouble. You're so much trouble. And I said, baby.
Thinking about like Last Call and talking about this collaborativeness that we have, everything is collaborative from front, from the initial start of the idea all the way through having that CD at the time, in hand. So we go from ideas, we all get together, and then we talk about the song, we practice it together, we all have lyrics in there for the entire song, next moving on to the recording process. And then you got Steven jumping in with the recording process, setting up all the mics, using his skills there. And then to the artwork of the album, which was all of Rob's artwork there on that last album. And then mastering it, putting it all together, packaging it, sending it off. And the only thing that we're not creating is the actual physical product itself. Everything else is created by us. And I think that means a lot to me, you know, as a musician in this band, to say that, hey, we've created everything from start to finish. And I think that's really cool.
Yeah, between Greg and Steven, we've never had to go to a real studio and have anything be done. I mean, we've always had their expertise and their creative process. They always knew their rig. They always knew what they wanted sound wise. Especially, that's the main thing. When you get a good drum mix, that's the first start of anything. If you watch any of like the masters who do things, you know, Butch Vig or, you know, anybody like that, you know, they're going to tell you that straight up. Like the first thing is you better get a good drum sound. And we've always had that with Greg because that's what he did all the time in his own studio. And, you know, having Steven go to school, you know, for that, you know, that's
special luxury.
Yeah. It's something that, you know, I think DIY is cool because it takes me back to my punk rock days when I was a kid. And, you know, we just put a cassette tape out and hit record, you know. So yeah, totally. How about some different places that we recorded and talk about, you know, Let Me In, you know, particularly the song Let Me In, which I can recall playing in Andy's basement and setting up and Steven like bringing gear over for that session.
Yeah, so we brought all of the same gear that we had used up at the cabin. And this is like a time where we had truly honed our creative craft. I think we were really sounding like the Martini Shot. I think we had spent all that time kind of finding our sound throughout the previous two albums, and I think we felt like we were finally truly finding it in this Last Call album. And so all that gear that we had up at the cabin, Steven brought all of it down into my basement. I had an unfinished basement at the time, and we've talked a little bit about this on our podcast, but we set everything up, and for some weird, strange, odd reason, the sound that came out of that unfinished basement was probably some of the best sound that we had gotten.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Which is crazy because it's concrete.
Yeah. And we'd been in a studio that cost millions of dollars up in Denver. I thought that was funny. They're like with an SSL console, which sounded beautiful, by the way.
So yeah, that album was very interesting. That album was my kind of introduction into the band. I was brought into the band while we were making that album.
That was your baby, yeah.
In fact, I remember I was sending some stuff that I was working on at school to the guys just to get some feedback. This was before I was in the band. And that's when I think Ryan sent me the demo for Love for Life.
Yep.
So I wrote horn. I couldn't actually record them because I was living in an apartment in Denver. But I wrote these horn lines on MIDI. And then I came down to Pueblo at my parents' house and recorded. I just did it as a two-part because in my head I was writing it for Rob and Brian. So I recorded a tenor and a soprano sax part, which, funny enough, those are the parts that are on the album, actually. Anyway, so it was during this time I was going to school up in Denver, and I had cooked up this crazy idea. So we had every student in the recording arts program could check out 4 hours of studio time per week. And there were 4 or 5 different studios on campus. There was one that was the big studio. It was Studio A, and it had an SSL console that was every bit of $100,000. They had every microphone you could imagine. You just had to check it out. So my idea was, well, if we're working on this album, maybe I can get the guys to come up and we can record. Obviously, we couldn't do the whole thing because it would just take too much time. But we could record 3 or 4 songs. So a couple of friends that I was going to school with, we booked some time and checked out every mic. I'm sure the other students that day were so mad at us. But I checked out every mic that we had. And we set up in there and It was pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
So fast forward then, when we were continuing to write the other parts of the songs, that's when we had set this date. We were going to go down to the cabin and record some more. So I had kind of assembled this remote recording rig that we could load up and take with us. I didn't have enough mics at the time, so we borrowed from the Buddha Boy guys. They let us borrow some mics.
Yeah.
So anyway, we took this whole rig down to the cabin and set up, and again, we recorded probably another 3 or 4 songs there. And then, fast forward a few months later, we had the last bunch of songs to do, and we did it in Andy's basement. So I brought the same setup, and I still think that was probably the best sound we had out of those 3 sessions.
And crazy enough, that it was just a
shout out to
unfinished
Scott
basement.
and Darcy, man. Love you guys. You guys are awesome. Love you guys. So the song itself is an amalgamation of so many different styles, right? And we're in the basement and we write this tune, but it started with probably, and if I'm wrong, let me know, but I'm thinking Pizzle trying to be Prince.
Mm-hmm. I just wanted to write a Prince song.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah, so you had recorded this little part, which was basically the verse.
Yep.
On GarageBand and sent it out. And then I took it and added like the first draft of horn parts. And then from there is when we started getting together and really working on it with everyone.
Which, by the way, they're the best horn parts that you guys have ever written.
Well,
and the sax solo is the best sax solo, I think, in my opinion.
Well, and once we brought Rob really helped me kind of refine the horn parts. He came up with the intro line that we came in with. And so, it's a really good example of everyone kind of putting their stamp on things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's such a cool part where the bridge, I think I was coming from like a Chili Peppers kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so the bridge is entirely different. And the sax solo that's laid over the top of that bridge is, to me, exactly what should be there. It's amazing.
It is that perfect example of this is where the idea started. Here came the lyrics. Here came the bridge. Here came the horn parts. You know, obviously, I mean, and Greg always does his thing on every tune. And we were talking about that a little bit yesterday when we had rehearsal, just some of the drum parts that you put on even just that first record. You know, it's just unique to each person. And I think, like with those drum parts we were talking about with yours, it's unique to Greg. I guess that's the special part about it, and you can see that in this tune.
And it's funny how it starts with that. Like I was trying to be James Jamerson, you know, like do 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 do, right? Like trying to play this with one finger kind of idea, and be very Prince-like and very Motownish, and then it goes into this crazy, heavy, hard-driven intro.
Yeah, that was my fault.
Yeah.
It's like it starts all Motowny, you know, and Princey, and then it's like boom, and I like it. I think it's really cool because it just kind of explodes into this whole thing, and then it releases into a funk groove.
Yeah, we wrote that big guitar riff at Andy's house.
Mm-hmm.
We had
on acoustics,
and we were just
you wrote that on an acoustic?
Yeah, we were trying to come up with different parts to move from section to section, and it ended up working. There's like, I don't know, a dozen guitar tracks layered on that.
I'm sure there is. Yeah.
Cool. We were sitting around my coffee table. I remember that.
Yeah.
We were all sitting around a coffee table and we wrote this heavy lick on acoustic guitars. Mm-hmm. You had no idea it was going to end up being kind of that big heavy part, and you can hear that part like it happens a lot like on the intros and outros of the podcast. Mm-hmm. You know, it's kind of one of the main licks of the band, really, which again is a good example of we feel, I think, pretty strongly that tune is a very good example of what the Martini Shot ended up sounding like in the end.
Yeah, and Andy and Brian kind of sitting down and going through lyrics. You guys have a pretty good process when you're, writing things down and pulling from it, and that was another good one.
I've always had a hard time, really, honestly, with lyrics. I have. And I mean, even, at the very beginning when Ryan and I were just doing it on our own, I'd always really second guess myself on lyrics and, you know, this, that, and the other. But when Brian and I started really working together on lyrics, it was always great to have that partner to be able to bounce things off of. So that I really think that's probably one of the unsung things. You would think that Brian had more to do with instrumentation and everything, but really Brian had a lot to do with lyrics in these songs.
Yeah.
Rob, you got anything?
I agree with everything they said. Thanks.
I think a big part of Rob's contribution is very similar to Steven's contribution. Like a lot of the horn lines that are actually written down and, you know, they're formulated that way. Also, another big contribution of Rob's is production with not only his own solos, but also with other solos throughout the recordings. And I think back to just our very first recording, our first, full album recording where he had to produce Dan Wiley, our trombone player that was a student of mine at the time. He was only 18 years old. And I remember him sitting down producing Dan's work in that session. And I think that's...
And now I can't play it.
Well, but you didn't play it in the first place. It was a trombone.
Well, Rob's solos have always been the most unique solos that, you know, a lot of horn players in general have specific formulas that they stick to that makes them predictable. And that's something that he is unique to his approach. And all of his solos are always different to me. I mean, he can play the highest note, like, you know, which is what everybody always does, right? Like they always go for that high note on the end so that the audience goes, wow, that was amazing, right? Mm-hmm. But like Rob has always done something more tasteful than that. And not that he hasn't used any of those techniques. I'm just saying that like it's always just such a fresh thing. And I know that he spends a lot of time in thinking about his approach before he records. And
I think that's a big part of the sound, honestly, is Rob's not only style, but just his approach. You're right. I mean, just his approach on any kind of solo that he ends up, you know, especially throwing on tape. That's part of, again, what makes us unique. And I think that Rob's style on his horn is
and the same goes for Bry. Mm-hmm. Like, I mean, I could say the same thing for anything that you've ever done in a solo, which there's some moments where like things sound so cool. It's almost like, I'm like, did Flea play that trumpet part?
It's because Rob coached me on it.
You know, there's things that you do with your solos work, you know, and especially like, you know, like your mute solo, you know, like Brand New, things like that. Like those are things that always remind me. I'm like, man, if you took any of those elements out of it, it wouldn't be Martini Shot. Like we've always been lucky to have like a awesome horn section, whether it was Steven, who's now on guitar, you know, playing in that whole concept, and you guys taking different instruments and playing baritone on the recordings or whatever it might have been. Those things like are the elements that piece it all together. And any of those things, if they weren't in the pot, in the melting pot, then it wouldn't be who we are. It wouldn't be Martini Shot.
One of the funnest ones. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No.
Just throw a flag. When he just wrote that. Did you put Yasun on your own home DAW or something?
Yeah.
And it was just a riff, and like we made a whole song out of it. That was fun because I got to play like all the horn parts.
And it's a lot. It's cool.
was so psyched on that because you borrowed one of my alto mouthpieces. I'm like, yeah, he's playing my mouthpiece on that song.
Thanks for asking me to play on it. No, I don't know. But everybody helped me out with that, and that was fun. And it just turned into something we didn't expect.
Turned into something awesome.
It was fun. I think that's I know we're getting into the weeds, but one of the more fun things that I think we've all experienced is when that song gets written in the studio. Because that has only happened a couple of times where the song ends up just being written in the studio. And the two examples I would have would be Yeah Son, that I think Ryan had already had it written, and it was pretty much done on his phone, and then he had to come in and re-record a bunch of it.
Yeah.
But then it was all Rob after that, and we got to go in and kind of produce him a little bit and got to walk through all of that with him. And then the other example I have is
Like I Can.
Like I Can.
Oh,
there it is. I knew it started with
No wonder I can't figure it out. So we've never played that song.
Yeah, this is a song I don't think we've ever played live. Maybe once we've played this song live. It's called Like I Can. An idea that Brooke started out with, and we practically wrote it in the studio piece by piece by piece.
The weirdest thing is that it was a pure planted seed of just a premise that I gave you, and you wrote some of the better lyrics I think we've ever had. And I don't know, other than it falling short, I guess, in us playing it live or anything like that, I still think it's a pretty good song.
It's one of my favorite songs.
So
there's a lot going on in that song. Plus it's drop D.
Yeah, that's why we never played it live.
Yeah.
And that wraps it up for another episode of Confessions of a Wedding Band. Thank you so much for listening to our little experiment in documenting our stories. Check us out on all the socials at Martini Shot Band, and of course check out our website, martinishotband.com. This podcast is produced by all of us here at The Martini Shot and audio engineered by the Emperor of Awesomeness, Stephen Falsetto. Keep supporting local music in your community, and don't forget about your wait staff. Tip them, and tip them well. We'll see you next time.
And I'm not sticking around. The wall has rotted, it's burning to the ground. Searching and searching, there's something to be found. The clock is ticking, and I'm not sticking around.